Learning how to, okay.
I mean, keep going. Talk about the
Oh,
beach.
okay,
Sure.
okay.
I'm
But
sure the people here love the beach.
like staying at the beach is so much different than just going to the beach. Like going to the beach, if like you gotta drive there, you gotta plan everything, you gotta figure out how much I gotta put it on the car, and
True.
then whatever you're doing, like I've got to drive back,
That's true.
And for us up here, I mean,
The beaches are no
Christian,
fun
you're not
unless you
that
get
far, right? You're probably what, about 20 minutes from Santa Monica without traffic?
Oh, there's never not traffic. That's 45
Fair.
minutes.
Fair.
It's still a
Okay.
drive.
Fair. All right. Well, my point is we're about 45 minutes from the beach too,
Mhm.
45 to an hour. And so it's like the drive out there in the morning, you're fresh. It's not that bad. But driving back in the afternoon after you've been out in the sun all day, that's tough. So staying out there is so nice and just going to sleep to the waves. And
Mm.
it's a privilege for sure. But but yeah, I've become, especially now that skiing is so expensive and I don't go up to the mountains to ski because we're doing it for 4 people. Talk about personal finance, right? Um, Back in my day, I could get a lift ticket for $30, but now family of 4 for one day, you're talking about like, I don't know, upwards of $500 for one day. So
well, that's a good segue into today's show. Welcome everybody that's here already. This is Mortgages with Millennials. I'm Robbie. That's Kristen, and we're very pleased to be joined today by David Personette and John Hirsch, talking about one of Kristen's favorite topics. Kristen, I feel like I want to cede the floor to you. I do want to say thank you very much to the Mortgage Collaborative quickly for sponsoring today's show. If you're not a part of their member network, I suggest you join. They have great events, great collaboration, working together, helping to improve your business and the mortgage industry. So thank you very much to them. Kristen, what are we talking about today?
Well, this is actually amazing timing that this is sponsored by the Mortgage Collaborative because they have just now, we just signed an agreement with them. We're partnering up with them as they support First Home IQ. So I'm the executive director of First Home IQ. Our focus is on bringing financial literacy to the next generation. And I'm just so excited about today's topic because we are talking about bringing financial literacy to the next generation through schools. So we have 2 high school teachers here today who are passionate about this subject. I know David we implemented our First Home IQ curriculum in his classroom and got some really great feedback. That was such a great way for us to learn from your students, David, and really excited to hear more about kind of your thoughts on how we, continue to grow in terms of reaching and having impact on the next generation. So that's what we're talking about today. Would love to hear from everybody in the audience too as we go along, but we're going to be really discussing some of the methods that we can better reach the next generation and also some of the, challenges and opportunities.
And I should introduce Mr. Hirsch, who was my freshman social studies teacher as well as my varsity football coach. Formative years for me and my lack of financial literacy. I'm really excited today. Kristen, where do you want to start?
Yeah, well, I didn't realize he was your freshman teacher. That's so fun. Cool. Well, I would love for us to just kick this off with hearing from you guys, both of you, kind of how do you feel financial literacy is being taught in the schools today? And maybe we'll want to go a little bit of a step back and say, like, what are your thoughts on teaching financial literacy in the schools? David, you were introduced by one of our ambassadors, Joe Soto, and I know this has been a really big passion project for you for a long time. So let's start with you. What are your thoughts on how we're delivering financial literacy in schools?
Okay, I'm gonna jump in. You guys can hear me clearly because I just wanted to make sure. I've been messing around with my mic for about 20 minutes now. I think it's in a
Yeah, it
good
sounds
spot.
great.
Okay, so I've been teaching for 20 years. I haven't worked a day yet. I kind of love what I do. I believe, John, you're gonna agree with that too. It's a love, it's a job that we really just enjoy doing. One of the things that I'm gonna say is something scary from the East Coast. In New York, where I work in Bensonhurst. There's something called a Regents. So for you to graduate your high school, you have to pass your regents. Okay. There's math, science, English, history, right? This has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but it does. And in the schools that I've worked at, the administrators, the assistant principals, will take the teachers that have a good rapport with the kids, a good connection, could teach students, and put them in the regents bearing classes. So if I'm an AP, I put my best teachers in that global regions class, in that US regions class, and even in the repeater class for the kids that didn't pass the regents, right? Now, it would be amazing if your whole staff were filled with great teachers. I haven't seen that yet. I haven't seen that in my building. I haven't seen that in other buildings. So administrators will often put teachers who have either checked out or never checked in, who have not really the skill set in classes such as government, which is not a regents bearing class, and economics. Now, I taught economics 1 year with another teacher. It was a team taught class. And the gentleman, I'm going to tell you, flew by the seat of his pants. I'm used to having my lessons as a history teacher months in advance. If I spend more time on the War of 1812, I know I can't cover civil rights towards the end of the year. So I've got to kind of juxtapose it against the arch of American history. And if it's a story I'm trying to tell, if it's, have them captivated, but also have them learning about history, then you've got to pick and choose the day. So if a student does say, well, what happened when they burned the White House? And I really want to get into it. I've got to know, okay, I got like 3 minutes. I could really get into this because I still have to cover Andrew Jackson or whatever. When I taught economics, the guy had, and I'm going to say this, nothing. It was just a joke of a class, didn't take it seriously, didn't have a final that would have built their knowledge on how to live. Instead, teaching like overarching big pictures where I don't know if it matters for the kid because you're not teaching them how to budget. You're not teaching them APR. You're not teaching them why it's better to own versus rent or vice versa. You're not even teaching them how to get a car. And this is for high school seniors. So it really took me back. I spoke to the APs and this is what they told me. What I'm telling you is what they told me. Sometimes you put a teacher in a place where they could do the best. Sometimes you put a teacher in a place where they could hurt the least. And that's how I felt like teaching economics and financial literacy in schools was, that it was more important for a kid to know popular sovereignty and John Locke than to understand how to budget. And now I've transitioned. So I did that 10 years ago. I do a program now called the Legacy Project. I'm to be doing this program where I take juniors and I help them with their career mindsets and SATs and researching schools and researching other options. That's why I was just with the military, because I want to make sure that if you want to do something, I at least have a monicum of information about that I can give you. Then I stay with them as seniors and help them with the financial aid aspect. And that's really where financial literacy matters, because if you're telling a kid you're going to take out a loan to go to this private school that's unsubsidized and you think it's a win because they're giving you $3,000, but they just jack up the price every year. So it's almost like I try to tell them, it's like when you go to buy a car, that sticker price isn't the real price. Don't think you win. That dealer liked me. He took off $5,000. No, honey, that's what they do all the time. Well, I stay with them once they're in college. So that freshman year, my job is to mentor them through it and help them with the financial aspect of it, because they didn't factor in books. They don't factor in room and board. They don't understand what it means to be an adult. We should start this younger. We should start budgeting younger. We should use a variety of different programs like First Home IQ that I've used in my class to teach them what it matters, how to start young, how to open up credit cards or debit cards or a bank account young and get your credit score up. These are things that are not being taught, at least not in my school. And my school is a progressive school. And if it's a good program, usually they have it. But like I said, sometimes you got to weigh what you got. Okay, I think I gave you a good 5 minutes of my world. If you guys have questions, throw it in there.
Yeah, I've got lots of follow-up questions for you, but John, let's go to you. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think to a degree, David elucidated a lot of the points that are consistent with my experience, but I think to his credit, I think he also, you know, gave us a kind of beacon for where we could be heading if we had more teachers like him in schools around the nation who took financial literacy seriously and were willing to advocate on behalf of their students and support their students. Um, you know, I'm you know, I think coming to this from the perspective of, you know, sharing what's not being done. And in a way, you know, on one level similar to what David said, but on another level, just looking at like California just added a financial literacy uh, graduation requirement. And it was literally was the 26th state to do so, which shows that half of the nation doesn't have financial literacy requirements for its students. And of those 26, I think only 5 require a standalone class on personal finance. Only 5, from what I could tell, have like state testing that includes it. So the vast majority of the country is experiencing things along the lines of what David shared with regards to the way that most schools approach it. And I think that my school is very much in that vein. We do a lot of things right. We have, and this is as much of a credit to our community as it is to our school. Like I live, you know, Robbie can tell you, you know, I live and I teach in an affluent area with a very, very high number of parents who are college graduates, who have postgraduate degrees. And I think the last I checked, something like 86% of our kids go directly off to a 4-year school. That's not including community college. And I'm not saying that to brag. My point is just to paint a backdrop for what our parents and what our families expect out of high school, which is to prepare their kids to get into the best college possible. And, you know, we could go into a totally different debate about what makes a great college, of course, right? David mentioned the financial point of view, which is vastly underappreciated. My point here is that the resources that our school allocates have traditionally been geared towards the things that our parents demand. More advanced placement classes. You know, we pay our teachers relatively well. And so we have a lot of really, really good teachers. And I've taught in a local private school when I was a new teacher that is one of the best reputations as any school in the, you know, in the state. And the teachers in the public school that I teach at are better. So we're really lucky in that regard. And when it comes to personal finance, it's an afterthought. And our you know, we've had an independent living class on the books that students can take for 30 years. And but half the years that I've been teaching here, and I've been teaching at this school for 20 years, half the years the class doesn't even run because it doesn't get enough signups. The kids think that they're supposed to take as many advanced placement classes as possible. And those, you know, 5 to 10% of kids that just want to spend as little time in high school as possible and get it over with, they're just looking at it and taking as few classes as possible. So there's never been a push for it. There's never been a requirement for it. And so we may have 20 to 25 kids in a school of, you know, 1900 that sign up to take this class, which up until now has been the only place that they can get personal finance. I taught that class for a couple years, but it was something that, you know, like David said, it's the kind of thing that as soon as I could get to something else, I did, to be perfectly honest with you. And part of that is because I didn't feel like I was good at it. You know, I didn't feel like I had the personal finance knowledge to give my students more than something very basic. I mean, I gave them more than they had. We talked about a lot of the things that David had. We did a unit where we you know, shopped for cars and looked at financing options. We did credit cards and investment and compound interest, and both for good and for bad, right? What David was talking about with loans, but also with regards to investing, which a lot of our kids are into. They have parents who are very into the stock market. They see that, and so that's something they're interested in. So the opportunity is there, but it gets pushed off to the side, and it's not something that kids have to do. They will. My guess is that it's simply going to be an embedded unit in our senior economics course. But I think it's going to be a long time before it's something that's really standardized. And it's going to come down to, much as David said, what this teacher wants versus what that teacher wants. There have been no discussions yet about standardizing the curriculum, but then again, it only got passed literally a month ago. So we'll see where it goes. I'm hopeful, but I'm still concerned.
Yeah, you bring up some good points around the fact that, I mean, how are people like there's half the country that is now required to have some financial literacy education, but are teachers educated in that or feeling confident to be able to educate their kids? I mean, parents, it's the same way. We talk a lot about why are people not getting financial literacy education? It's like, well, nobody has the education to begin with, and so that lack of confidence plus the anxiety around money conversations to begin with, it's really hard to pass that on. So I'm curious, having that, like, that, like, how do you overcome some of those challenges? And as you have the requirement or you don't, what are some of the ways that you found to be successful? I guess, David, having implemented some of these programs, what do you feel has been successful in overcoming some of those challenges?
Okay, two things before I'm going to answer your question, but I just want to jump back to what you said a second ago. Would you rather have a teacher who has been in the field and could talk the talk, but doesn't know how to teach, or someone who's a professional teacher who's given a curriculum and learns how to teach it and could deliver the message effectively? Those are like, that's a question. You're not going to find both. It's hard to find both. Back to your question a second ago, you said, so one of the things I really respect about you is that you brought in outsiders who were in different fields. I think that's a major thing, especially for my aspiring college graduates who want to get into a career, to meet a person in that field. I don't know if schools do that as much as they should anymore. I think the drive for AP, in my son's school, my son is 15 now, there's like 15 teams that all their after school hours are taken. My daughter does singing, and there's so many different things. So the time is not really there for it, but they need to squeeze it in. I do like it to be one of these mandatory things that if you're going to graduate, not only did you need the regents, but you need to have a financial literacy degree or something. There's certificates out there that can be gotten. I think marrying what you're doing with that so that they're leaving with a mindset of, I feel like I have so many thoughts in my head. This new economy is not the economy of the past. And a lot of my students, so I stay with them. I'm on the phone with them all summer because there's something called a summer melt. You graduated, you've been accepted to college, but then something comes up and you don't go. You don't show up in September. Maybe you got a job, maybe something happened. And so my job is to keep them motivated. A lot of them are complaining that there's no jobs for their age range. There's nothing that's going to make them money that they want. And I've been stressing that this is a new world. If you were on the ladies lacrosse team, what you need to do is you need to go to a YMCA, use your financial knowledge. You need to make up yourself some flyers. You need to set up 4 kids with lacrosse in a park, and you just teach them how to do stuff. There's other ways, I'm saying, to learn your finances than only getting a job working for someone else. Mm-hmm. In regards to the schools having this in it, it's got to be something mandatory. It's got to be taken not as a joke. Like we said, you got to find teachers that have been in the field, or at least have a person like myself who's open to having more people in the classroom talking about how they got there. What you guys did this last year for my students who were in college and going to be in college was you had different people come in, talk about their experiences, humanize them, talk about the challenges. The connections are going to be there because some of the challenges they had are the same ones my students have, and how they grew, how they failed and picked themselves up, and how they found the right direction. And I think that's our best way over there for teaching financial literacy.
Yeah, I had, first of all, I was really surprised whenever we implemented the curriculum with you guys. I didn't expect to bring in a guest speaker at every single class. And that was really rewarding because hearing the students, in fact, I have well, anyway, I have a quote from one of the students, one of your students that said, one of the most surprising things I've learned so far is how many guest speakers have become successful. That this is inspiring because I've never had a chance to talk to successful people. And I think just showing up, I mean, those guest speakers were not doing a presentation, they were doing Q&A, you know, and I think, and then we had, you know, different coursework that they would do. But I feel like, and now we're adding games to this to try to make it a little bit more entertaining and engaging. But I feel like if you're someone who is, you know, interested in volunteering in your community, it doesn't have to be like, hey, I'm going to show up and do a presentation. Just showing up, being an expert, people want to ask questions, you know, and engage with you. So
yeah, it's hard, I think, what David said about the scheduling, you know, of our students, but also of ourselves. It's harder to bring guest speakers in, but you can do it. It's just something that takes a lot of planning, and for that takes, you know, one of the kind of you know, underappreciated elements of that is a teacher who is embedded in their community. You get a new teacher, as enthusiastic as they may be, as knowledgeable and as wonderful as they may be, if they don't have the connections in their community, it's going to be harder to pull in those speakers. So, you know, having a teacher who has been there for a while, and now you're talking about issues of teacher retention and you know, and broader issues as well. But you know, I think David's point about things changing is highly valid, and it reminds me of a book I'm reading called Nomadland, which is about, you know, 60 somethings and 70 somethings and how they're like, they've underplanned for retirement, or the world has changed. A lot of them, it was the stock market crash or the Great Recession that really eliminated their life savings. But one of the points that the author is elucidating is a lot of older people grew up in the era of you know, of factory towns and of this middle class where you could have the same job for 25 or 30 years and there was a pension included in it, and that is just less and less, it seems like, the case. And you know, you two can probably, actually all three of you, the more I interact with people in my field, the more I realize that I'm older than most of them now. So you three can probably, you know, speak to that more than I can, but especially me, like, I'm a career teacher. Like I went to college, I got out of college, I got my teacher credential, I became a teacher, and my financial picture, as limited as it is sometimes, is predictable and it's reliable, and that's not the case for most people. So, you know, the struggles that people have and the challenges that people have, not only do I feel like a lot of teachers, especially ones like me, don't have the degree of experience, personal experience, to share. It's also not something that we're traditionally taught how to do, but it's also something that, you know, with the changing economic situation that young people are facing, it's also something that fewer people my age and the people who would generally be passing on this knowledge, a lot of us don't have the knowledge to pass on because the reality is very different than the one that we grew up with.
It's a good point.
Yeah. Let's talk next generation. And I have kind of a two-part question. Maybe like you alluded to, Mr. Hirsch, it varies by metro or school district. What percentage of responsibility falls on parents to teach financial literacy versus teachers? That's part one. And then part two is, are you seeing any habits in the new generation that are different from your generation?
David, feel free to jump in if you've got an answer ready.
You can't blame the parents.
Yeah,
you can't do that. It's a different. You just said the environment for work is different. I was a latchkey kid, and many of these kids are latchkey kids too. So, what's more important, teaching fundamentals of, you know, how to save money, or working so that the electricity is on? So it's not as easy. I would never blame parents. I'm teaching for 20 years. If I didn't want to teach, I would, but I still want to teach. So parents do the best they can. And we get each kid at a different level. And all we could do is just try to get them up as much as we can. In
Yeah.
regards to, well, I'll let you jump in, John. You jump in because you want to talk about the differences in the generations and stuff, I think.
Yeah, I think that, the reality is that, with half the states not having it, it has fallen to parents, and it does often. I completely agree with David. I don't think it should, but that's the situation we're in right now. So if we're asking the question of, what is it that parents should be doing? What can parents do? I think there is, and I'm speaking more as a parent now, a parent of a 15-year-old and a 13-year-old, as someone who's kind of figuring out with my wife how we're navigating that. There are things that parents can do. And I think there are some things that are really low-hanging fruit, things that parents can do that don't require an unusual level of financial literacy. I think that there's a balancing act of how much do you tell your kids? And my wife and I have made a conscious decision that we do communicate certain things with our children, that when we um when we go on a really nice vacation, which we'll do once every few years, that they know that that's something that mom and dad have been working extra and saving towards, that we're planning to do that vacation doesn't just fall out of the sky. And then when their grandparents take them somewhere, that they're really fortunate to have that experience, and they should be grateful for it. And understanding that, okay, they're going to go out with their friends. All right, so we're going to put $20 on your Apple Pay, and this is what it's for. And okay, think about it. All right, what are you going to do? You're going to go, okay, you guys are going to go to the movies. All right, how much does that cost? All right, you guys are you going to get popcorn? Are you going to get candy? Okay, how much does that cost? And are you guys, you're going to go out afterwards? And just those little thinking ahead about your own finances, even if it's just hours ahead, are little things that I think plant seeds. And I think also things like, and this is a statement of my relative privilege, and I'm aware of that, but getting my son a bank account that from the money that he's saved from his birthdays for how many years, and getting him, I know that a lot of the major brokerage houses like Fidelity and Schwab, they have little kid accounts that you can get, and learning about things like compound interest and planting the seed of, hey, you don't need a lot, but if you start now, it's going to be a lot better than starting in 10 years, let alone 20 years, let alone 30 years. And just thinking about finances in those terms and planting those seeds, it shapes the lens through which they view a lot of things that they see. And I think that can, unless you're either painting unless you're painting a really polarized picture of everything's fine, don't worry about it, or everything is horrible, you have to always worry about it. I think most of the in between is going to be a good thing for kids.
Well, you
Yeah, I
both have
think
a balancing act to do because you're teachers and parents. David, you said it falls on the teachers, but I'm going to say, as a parent, how are you teaching your kid financial literacy?
so. Yeah, I was gonna say I go food shopping with my kids all the time, and it's tricky because I'm also teaching them to avoid high fructose corn syrup and red 40 and all that stuff. And it's when they say to you, this big box of cheesy whatever, spicy whatever, is $15, and I'm like, do you want to know why? Look what's in it. And then we walk to the vegetables, and they're like, wow, strawberries cost this much or whatever. And so you're teaching them to budget, but also to see what's worth it and what's not. I think one of the craziest things about our country that we're in right now is not only is financial literacy not taught, but nutritional knowledge is also not taught either. And if you go to another country, half the things you see in the stores aren't there, or the ingredients. My new thing now is, if you want something, we have to be able to make it at home. So unless we have sodium glutamate thyroside, then we can't have that. But that's a lot of money. We have to go food shopping and budget. So yes, I want to buy this and that, but sometimes we've got to think what's best for the buck. And when they're with you, they see that. That's just one example. You had said if they're going to the movies, I would say something like, my son's name is Mason. Mason, you want to go to the movies? I need the lawn done. So I'll give you the money. You get that done. You get to go to the movies. And you know what? I'll even Uber for free. And I think that responsibility and that growth. So he wants to be a pediatrician, and he doesn't know the years of ramen noodles he's going to have to deal with to get to that level. But he's going to learn the value of a buck when he does. Hopefully, we're instilling it now. We also did the set them up with a bank account. You got to make sure they don't have hidden fees and stuff like that. But we're also doing things in the course that we taught. There was something called, remember we was trying to bank NYC, get people to get bank accounts and learn literacy like that. The way I see it is the food, the home ownership, the financially stable is all the same thing that we should be teaching. It all comes together to create a better person, a better society. And the more we know, the better. So when I'm teaching my lesson on what a for-profit college is, those are schools that take money, offer promises, never, you can't transfer your classes to other schools because they're like, that school's not legitimate. When I'm teaching that, I'm also going to be teaching about financial literacy through that. Look at how much they're costing. What are you getting for that money? And versus a public institution. So for me, in my college knowledge courses that I teach, I bring that in. Robbie, I wanted to answer your other question. You had more you were saying.
Parent versus or habits of the next generation that you're noticing was the second part of that.
They all want to download games on their phone. They're all trying to do it. Oh, you want the next one of this? You've got to put the money into it for that. And my daughter's like, I have money. My daughter is 5. The money she has is the change she steals from me. So she's like, look, I have all this money in my piggy bank. And I'm like, okay, only one. It's a true thing.
Yeah, I feel like I don't know if this is a word, the increased digitization. There we go. The increased digitization of finance, I think, is creating an even larger disconnect for many of our young people between reality and their perception. We all know what it's like to hold cash and to hand someone something physically and have an unconscious sense of the meaning behind that because we're physically giving something up. And yet even I am loath to do that now. I hate carrying cash around. It's a burden to me. Although I've started to do it because of certain places where there, like there's been a rash of skimming off of gas stations around here. So I just pay cash at gas stations now. But my point is that, one of my friends who teaches math to 8th graders, she was talking about, I don't remember what specific math concept, but one of her students who is not mainstream. This student is a bit of an outlier, but still as a point. She was talking to the student about why this is important. The student was kind of checked out, and the student was like, well, why do I need to know this? I just have Apple Pay. And this is an affluent student in an affluent community who, like I said, is not the mainstream even in our community. But the point is still, I think, valid, which is that, our students, whether it's with games or online gambling, which I know a lot of our male students do now. I think there's just it's so easy to disconnect from what money actually is and from what finance actually is. I'm more concerned. And yet the flip side is, with the growth of the internet and the things like you guys are talking about, I also see an increase in students who are really taking advantage of the increased access to information about personal finance and trying to take the bull by the horns and doing things like starting their own businesses, doing their own finances. And it's interesting to see the real polarization there, based on the current digital and all the platforms that we have.
I think it's really important that we also recognize, like with the digitization, we are viewing money in a little bit of a different way. I don't feel the same cash connection that I used to, where now if I have cash, it feels like free money. Like it's like, that's not going to impact my bank account because it's already out of there. And so I have to be really careful about how I hold cash. And I think people are like, kids don't even learn how to balance a checkbook anymore, but they don't need to know how to do that. They need to know how to budget their money but I was one of the most interesting parts of learning, going through the program with you, David, was learning how to engage the students. And, David was like opened every single class with a question that drilled down to something important to them. Like he called them do now questions. And so every, students would open up with journaling out something related to, their goals or how they grew up around money or something that would connect the dots. And I feel like that's, initially with First Home IQ, we rolled out online courses that I think are good. The information's good. We have great presentation material, but that's not going to move the needle in a classroom conversation. And now we have some new games and things that can make it really practical. But I think even in the parent conversation, it has to be something that takes it to a really practical point that the student can imagine, today, this is how this impacts me, whether it's in a game I'm playing or it's in going to the movies or whatever. So, yeah, it's interesting to think about the way that we can expand the way we educate. So I'd love to, as we're kind of wrapping up, I want to, first of all, roll a couple of things by you guys. At First Home IQ, we have these money milestones where we're thinking about like how people, as they're going through their lives, what should they hit by the time that they're 16? And at 16, we think we should have budgeting, saving, investing as they're old enough to get a job. That those should be covered. I realize I don't have them in these slides, but age 18, they're getting offered credit cards, they're getting offered student loan debt. They should have a basic understanding of credit score and debt. And then by the age of 21, when you're really getting sent off into the world, that's when you should have a basic understanding of home ownership or, how to build wealth. So I just want to get your thoughts on, as we think about how we empower the next generation, how do you feel about those money milestones? And what do you think we could do as an industry to better reach the next generation?
John, you want to start? You want me to speak?
Oh, I sign me up, right? Just sign me up. I don't teach the finance stuff. I don't teach economics, but it's something that, I'm taking notes, right? Okay, First Home IQ, like, okay, I got to send that to my colleagues who teach econ, for where the personal finance is probably going to get embedded, because I know they want to make it practical. Every teacher wants to have lessons that their students are engaged in. What's the most fun thing for us as teachers? To have students that are really into what we're doing, right? And so when we can do the kinds of things that David is doing already and that you're trying to work on, Kristin, with getting students engaged with practical contexts for learning financial literacy and having these milestones that are perfectly appropriate cognitively and perfectly appropriate, in my opinion, situationally in terms of life experience. I think that they're really reasonable. And it's the kind of thing that I'm thinking, okay, am I doing that with my 15-year-old? Is he gonna be ready for that? Yeah, okay, we can do that. So I think it's great. Personally, I think it's great. And I'd love to bring it to my school to the degree that I can.
We're working on a parent program too, so that you would have, it's different doing a one-to-many versus a one-to-one. And so, whenever you have that, you'll have to check it out and test it out for us too.
Yeah, I think the end result is the why. If the kids can find a why this matters, then whatever you're teaching them gets easier. When I talk to my kids going to college, I have to show them why going to college versus not going to college could be beneficial for them. When I talk about them either going to the military, why would the Air Force be different than the Navy? What are you trying to get out of it? And there's the why. So in regards to financial literacy, the why should be home ownership and independence. In theory, You want your students to, by the age of 30, which I think is even high, have a concept of, I'm going to have a career. I'm going to have my home. I'm going to start a family. I'm going to be productive. I'm going to be a voter. I'm going to be jury duty. I'm going to be all about civics and stuff like that. So I think one of the things that's gone away because of the AP courses, which is great, but AP courses, cause of, like I said, in my scenario, the Regents matters more than, ooh, I'm going to throw something at you, because we had the COVID shutdown of schools where we taught just like this. Although you only saw the letters of the faces, no student had their cameras on. What's more important, and I would ask this to my kids, you got a 90 in your calculus, but you cheated on everything and you learned nothing, versus you got a 75 on calculus. You gave your all to it, and that's how much you really know. And you'd be surprised that no one said the 75.
I would not be surprised at all.
It's frustrating that they were all like, I'd rather just get the grade than actually learn the material. So what we've lost is that the civics course, the what we're all about. We became teachers. I know I became a teacher personally because it's the village concept. If I can help out my neighbors, I make a better town. And I sleep well at night knowing that I give my all to it. My daughter wants to say hi. Do you want to go say hi? Hurry up, and then you can go downstairs. Oh, they can't see you.
We can't see.
Be in here. Okay.
Hi.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay. Whoa, be careful. Oh, okay.
I was gonna say, David, give me the 90 because the ends justify the means. I'm trying to get into a good college. I'm trying to get a good job. I'm trying to afford a house. We're running out of time here, but I do want to say before we go, we talked about habits of the next generation. When it comes to reaching them and getting through and into their head, any advice for our audience? It's mostly comprised of originators.
Listen when your kids talk. Remember what they're saying. Spit it back to them, showing that you care. If they believe in you, they believe in what you're presenting. If they don't trust you, if you're an op, if you appear to be someone that's a gotcha teacher, like, oh, you're late 5 points off, then they don't value what you're saying because they don't believe you're on their team.
Yeah, I think that's, one of the most powerful things that I've learned as an educator is the power of the personal relationship, the power of showing that you care, but also of high expectations. And I think that, a lot of them, they want to have a reason why. The vast majority of them, the ones that most need our connection and that the most struggle with it, they want to know that you care, but they also want to know that there's something for them in it, right? We're going to have some kids that are in it for the transformation. They just want that connection, but the vast majority, it's some kind of a transaction, right? It's what am I going to get out of being here, and giving them practical things that they can walk out with. Really maximizes their engagement and their learning. So that's up to us to have that challenge. Yeah.
Very well put. We're out of time today. I think the audience thought this was one of the best discussions we've ever had. I want to thank both of you, David, Mr. Hirsch. This was fantastic. And as a reminder to everybody out there, if you like today's discussion, we have a whole slate of shows on the Chrisman commentary. Ton of different subjects. Sign up. There are notes in the email. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Big thank you to the Mortgage Collaborative for sponsoring today's show. Kristin, any final words?
Yeah, I'm just going to share a deck for if anybody wants to share this with your local school district or a teacher, or, just making the introduction would be great to First Home IQ. Our number one goal is, again, to bring financial literacy to the next generation. Thank you guys so much, John and David. It has been such a wonderful conversation, and just appreciate the incredible work that you guys do through your jobs. So thank you for spending some time with us today.
Thanks for having this conversation. And David, thank you so much for all you do to educate your students.
John, thank you for all that you do also. Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Bye, guys.